All right, so we have a lot to do. I made a folder. That's all I did so far. And we're going to start with Claude Code, but I don't want to use Claude Code without MCPs working. So what I want to do is look up how to do that. All right, just doing some research. Basically, I started a Claude project in Claude Code. Sorry, Claude Desktop. And we're going to use Claude Code, but I want to get the desktop going so I can ask it questions as I go. So you can see my work patterns here. So we'll probably end up with a few GitHub repositories. And in this case, I'm just going to get going with Claude. Now I was looking for a Next.js MCP that would potentially have build patterns because I want files in a certain way in a certain place. And I think that's important. I haven't seen one yet. I'm going to keep looking. And then once we have that, we are going to also just get Supabase running on my machine with Docker, I think, or just the command line tool. And then, which uses Docker. So I got to make sure I get Docker running. And then after that, we can just start using Claude Code to talk to that. And you can see how this can get tricky. Do I use my local Supabase and run it there, or do I use the staging one? Because then my flow-wise and my active pieces can talk to that. I'm going to do that route because, again, everything changes. And right now it's tricky because we as developers have so long worked locally, and I'm realizing now if I have a staging server and a production server, not only can I do stuff when building the backend more easily and integrate with it from my local, I can then connect to it more easily from all these different services. Not that you can't do that locally, but I'm like realizing it's a big pain to do it locally. Yeah, it is. So this way I'm going to see how far I get. And some of this we might hit walls. I just want to hit them with you. So I made this project. I gave it some information, not a ton. So hopefully that will help us in the desktop, which is another thing I just want to surface here is that's how I do things. So at that point, I'm going to go to my Coolify server and I am going to build out that particular area. So we're going to build out the meal planning project. So we're going to make a project. We're going to add, we're going to call it meal planner. And it's production by default, but I'm going to add staging, and that will remind me we're going to do that. And then the keyest part here for now, we'll put in Flowwise, we'll put in the other stuff in a moment, but the one that's going to take the longest to build is Supabase. And the funny thing, it'd be interesting to see how we do some stuff with database interactions. I have to learn things there. So let's go save that. Oh, I don't have to save it. I just got to click deploy. So let's let that deploy, and then we'll start using that with our local system. Now, our local use will be frustrating because I have to hide my secrets. But when I hit the staging thing, the staging server, I will see stuff for real on that staging server, and then we can start making our tables and our migrations. So I'm going to get that going as well. Now, again, MCPs, I've been finding them here, but I'm not sure if it's the best one or the only one. There's actually another one I know of too. I'm going to see if I can find it. But is there a library for Prisma? I haven't seen it yet. So, yeah, it's a bummer. Melee will come in handy for other work. But I don't see something that really says, hey, this is how you use Prisma really well. And Prisma is this library here. Maybe there's a better one. If anyone knows a better one, just write it down. So let's do this. I'm waiting for my system to kick in. I'm going to go to the terminal. I'm here. I'm going to start Claude Code here, or I might open Cursor and start Claude Code in Cursor, because that gets funny too, because then I have two things working at once. So let's do that. So here's what we're used to with Cursor. Some people. Windsurf is another good one. And so now we're in this folder, not much going on. So I'm going to open up this terminal. I'm going to say Claude, and I'm going to proceed. This is going to be the back end. So I'm going to focus on just migrations with the back end. Well, eventually we'll have a front end. And I don't want to think of this as a single page application. What I want to think of this as two repositories so that we can separate the two so we don't break the AI's brain mostly. Typically I wouldn't do this. I'm doing this now though because it has been helping. So we're going to make this the back end. So I'm going to go back to Super Whisper or whatever it's called. This is part of an application. This is the back end part. This is basically going to drive our migrations. So I want you to get this set up for using Prisma and that particular library to drive our migrations. I will then include the Postgres URL in a .env file, so if you can set up an example file for me in the git ignore, that would be great. By the time you're done with this first prompt, I should be ready to start giving you some ideas for tables that we start the migration around. I press stop because if you mess up, you lose everything. Hold on here. Let's just grab that. Okay, and then we're going to give it to here. I'll fast forward a lot of these things. I just wanted to let you see how I typically work. The other tricky thing is multitasking. I have some video editing stuff going on there, and I have this, and then this is going to run, and then we're going to go there. You get carried away for better or for worse. Does Mac have sticky notes still? Maybe I'll use this to cover my credentials. I hate video editing, if anyone ever wants to volunteer for that. So we got Prisma in it, and I wish I could just tell it to do everything. Don't ask. Let's go see how the Supabase is doing. It's looking good. Basically, I'll change the URL after the video, so I'll make a note to remember that. When we go to the URL, it's going to ask for a password. I guess I can't do that because then I can't see it. Jeez. So here's our dashboard, and then I'll pause for a moment, and then we log in. We got our Supabase ready to go. It's at a particular URL. I'll be throwing that into the env file, and I will not be talking to Postgres directly unless we need to, and then we'll come back to that. I think I do, though, because we're going to have this guy use Postgres. All right, so I cut that out because I already did it in another video, how to set up Supabase, how to open the port, how to do the firewall. I'll link to the video below, but it's just the same thing over. So we're going to jump back in now. We've connected, firewall's done, port's done, everything's done. Same as that other video. All right. So here we go. We have no tables, but let's go now plug in the Claude area. So let's go see how that guy is doing, and then we'll move over the credentials for that. Let me go get that open. All right, do you want to make an edit? Yes, should we just do everything without that? We'll be getting more coffee in a moment. All right, back, had to get coffee. So it says it's done with the Prisma side. So now I'm gonna go set up the .env to connect to my Postgres database. So if you look here, we have an example. So we just have to fill in that information. So I'm gonna go do that right now. Okay, so I set up the .env now. The .getignore will ignore that. The .env.example is my example. And when you're using Supabase and Coolify, it typically will default to the username Postgres, the table or database schema Postgres, and the schema public, which is fine. And then we have some ID, IP, and then some port. Okay, so my .env has the right stuff. Now, what I want to do, though, is just to see if the system can even connect. Now, there's a Prisma Studio we're going to run, and that's right here. It's pretty cool. But it needs a starting point to connect. So I'm going to run something really quick with Claude to set this up. Now, while it's doing that, I want to remind myself what's my first table. And it's going to be this one. And it's going to link back to the users table. And I'm going to let it know all this. And that will get tricky because Supabase has these, the nice thing is Claude knows about this, but it has an auth area. And so the auth area has a way of saying, hey, this is the user. So when they have rights to things with row level security, only they can look at things. So those rows. So we're going to set up our first user. So let me go do this. So I'm going to add a user here. And we're going to paste a user there, and we're going to use a password and then auto confirm the user, and we're done. So now I have a user I can log in as. And hopefully that will help us because that user has this ID which establishes this pattern, which we'll see what happens when it makes its first table. Let's go back to the command line. And it says it's ready to go. npm run test connection. Okay, cool. I wonder if it could run it for me, but let's just see what happens. So I'm going to cancel that and run that. Okay. Oh, interesting. I must have missed it. It probably told me that, and I just ignored it. npx Prisma generate. So just remember that. Alex was found. I think that's okay. Let's find out. And let's hand that over to Claude now, because usually it just works. And I probably forgot a step up here, to be honest. See, ready for me to do it. I could have just done that. I should just do that. Let's just see what happens. If this doesn't work, I'll just move on with making the tables. I don't really want to make silly tables though. So our first table is preferences. Let's go do that one. That's a bummer. No big deal. We can seed our data too, which will be interesting later on. All right, we're connected. Everything's good. So what I wanted to show earlier was if I do npx Prisma Studio, we can then get a nice UI to see our area. And I wonder if, we'll see why that errored out after. It usually works just fine. We'll see why it errored out in a moment. I want to move on though with the actual migration, and then I'll let it know that we have a user ID. Let's go grab that. Now remember, all this stuff is open source, and sure, these businesses, some of them do make money off their products, but not all of them. So as we use these products, it's a good idea to just try to go to their GitHub and sponsor them. So just keep that in mind. Okay, first table is preferences. All right, let's see what it did. So now I can, interesting. So let's split this in half so we don't keep going places here. And we're gonna do npm run that. All right, and then we go back to here, but I don't want it to break. It has a habit of breaking the things for that. See, I didn't want it to do that. That's too bad. So I'm gonna fix that right now. And let's go do that. All right, it's still thinking. Prisma DB push or npm run to create a table. Interesting. Okay. Let's try this one. Oops. Okay. Let's go back to Supabase. Oh, it actually already loaded. Cool. So we have our table. Now the question will become, how do we interact with it through our API? And that we're going to build with active pieces. So we're going to set that up in the next video. All right, I just finished the edits there. That was quite a long video for just getting a database table. But remember now, we have a migration process. So when we want to deploy this to production, we can do something that's a little trickier when you don't have this. So as we move forward, and once I get the MCPs in place, which, sorry, I didn't finish that. I don't know what happened there. It will get easier. And again, two things. One is I'm trying to find the balance between driving the car and letting the systems drive. So I'm going on a hunch here, and I could be wrong. So we'll see where the balance is. And second, I want to be able to deploy this. So when I go to staging, from staging to production, I don't want to click the database and add a bunch of tables and stuff. So as you get deeper into the application, you want to be able to use migrations to add tables, to add fields to tables, to change fields as you go. And there's amazing moments in Lovable and other places where you build something quick and you're done, but then long-term, this is a long-term staging production workflow that a lot of people are used to. So when we run this on GitHub to deploy to production later on, it will do the migrations for us. And we're already doing staging, but and later on production, so that'll be nice. So this will pay off, so I promise. All right, the next one, like I said, we'll start using this database, Supabase, inside of our other applications. Using Supabase, and we can just connect over the API flow that it has. If active pieces needs to access it, it will be internally via the Docker container it's inside of. So that's nice. And we'll cover that. You'll see how one of the coolest things is we have these Docker containers that can talk to each other internally in their internal network. So they're not talking outside the web. So that is nice as well. And we'll hit that as we get into the weeds there. All right.